let's talk about the fats. So there's a lot of controversy in the diet world and the health world and, you know, all the different books that come out about fats. Are there really healthy fats? I personally think yes. Obviously, your body needs fat. The brain is pretty much all fat, okay? Cell membranes are fat. Like, we have to have fat. You have to have cholesterol. The problem is oxidation of the fat, okay? When you have the fat that gets oxidized because of oxidative stress, then it becomes a foam cell, then it becomes an atherosclerotic plaque, then it becomes a stroke or a heart attack. You can't oxidize your fats. But fats in and of themselves are decent if they're decent fats. So if they're good olive oil, if it's good polyunsaturated fatty acids from like fish, like salmon or sardines or herring, if it's from flax, from hemp seed. What you don't want are highly processed fats or bad vegetable fats like from corn oil. And even though a very well-marbled steak might be delicious, that's not a really healthy fat. So what makes a fat healthy versus unhealthy? Well, here we just talked about a Mediterranean breakfast. Here's one of your best fats ever, avocado. And also, avocado has a very high smoke point of note, so it's a real good it's a real good oil to cook with because it's not gonna denature while you're cooking with it. So the best healthy fat, by far, extra virgin olive oil, then avocado oil, and I probably shouldn't be ranking these. Definitely extra virgin olive oil is the best, but the rest can sort of fall in line. Fatty acid-rich fish like salmon and trout. Some coconut oils, and I'll show you in a slide later, coconut oils are pretty saturated, but the medium chain triglycerides in the coconut oils are good. And the fats you find in nuts, like almonds and walnuts and whatnot. Next slide. What? Oh. So talk about fats real quick, because I know a lot of people don't really know what we're saying when we say saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. This comes down to your organic chemistry, okay? The saturated fats are very stable, solid at room temperature. This is the stick of butter you leave out and it never melts. Animal fats, tropical oils. So at the molecular level, every carbon bond is occupied by a hydrogen. They're very stiff molecules. They pack in tightly. And then they don't have the flexibility. They don't ever become liquid until you melt them. Monounsaturated, these are liquid at room temperature, but they solidify when they're cold. They only have one double bond. Okay, so two carbon atoms that are double bonded together. They cannot pack as tightly as the saturated fats. They can become looser. Polyunsaturated, two double bonds, okay? And they don't pack together even when they're refrigerated. So these are the oils that stay liquid even when they're cold. So polyunsaturated, so the unsaturated part, saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, that has to do with the chemical bonds that are allowed in the molecule itself. So bad fats, like I said before, are actually oxidized fats. So the top one shows you sort of a H&E stained picture of adipose cells or fat cells. Under that shows you the process of the creation of what's called a foam cell, which is the beginning of the plaquing that happens in arteries. So when you have coronary artery disease, the top right shows you what happens. So before you have coronary artery disease, all of your vessels are a nice wide open tube, blood goes in and out, no problem. When you get coronary artery disease, all of a sudden it shrinks. You have a tiny tube. Why? Because the intimal lining or the lining of the vessel got filled with foam cells from atherosclerosis. These get calcified, and then all of a sudden you went from a nice, flexible, beautiful tube to bring blood to a stiff, damaged, narrow aperture tube that doesn't get blood to where it's supposed to go. Thus, you have things like heart attacks and strokes. So omega-3s reduce the incidence of this. They don't let the foam cells happen. They reduce the thrombotic action, so they reduce blood clots and the ability to sort of pack in there, and they keep the flexibility. And again, they reduce the oxidative stress that makes the fat cells oxidated to begin with. So the LDL that you always hear about, low density lipoprotein, that's bad when it gets oxidized. Omega-3 can prevent that. So the primary protein in the Mediterranean diet is fish or shellfish, and this is where your omega-3s come from. Shrimp, oysters, redfish, and you can tell I'm in Louisiana, grouper, cod, I guess, from up north. So fish, basically. You want brain food. You don't want farm-raised fish if you can help it, unless you know what they're feeding the farm fish. Red meat once a month, grain-fed organic. Olive oil should be your primary fat. And when I say olive oil, not your cheapest olive oil you find on the shelf, because that's effectively just oil that they've sort of added back some coloring and flavoring to make it smell like olive oil. You need virgin olive oil, or better yet, extra virgin olive oil. Some dairy products are okay. Why? Because again, on the continuum of processing, they're closer to the minimally processed. I'm not talking about, oh my gosh, I can't even think of it. What's that processed cheese stuff that you make the casseroles with? Yeah, I'm not talking about Velveeta. Velveeta is a highly processed cheese product. I'm talking about your real good blue cheeses, your real good cheddars, things that are low processed, minimally processed. And again, the diet reduces the risk of oxidized, low density lipoproteins, so the cell membranes work better, they function better, you don't get the foam cells, you don't get the plaquing. There's actually been a lot of studies looking at the Mediterranean diet versus low-fat diets or high-carb diets or whatever, name a diet, they've studied them against each other. It's actually been better results for population health than even low-fat diets. Again, controversy there because there's always going to be randomization problems or adherence problems or survey truthfulness, response problems, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, there's a much better ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, lower ratio, closer to the 1-to-1, where we should be based on evolution, as opposed to where we are in America, which is 20-to-1. So everything is just more flexible, less stress, good inflammation, no bad inflammation, no foam cells, fewer reactive oxidized species. Now, this is what I talked about before. This is a chart showing you different components of different oils, okay? The light color is oleic acid, which is omega-9. That is a monounsaturated fat. The dark purple is your saturated fats. The pink, your polyunsaturated fats. So the top, you would think, oh, I should eat safflower oil. Look at that. Well, the problem with safflower oil is it's highly processed. So it's rendered in a factory. So I'd probably stay away from that. Extra virgin olive oil is your friend, will always be your friend. And then you go down the line, okay? Coconut oil, remember I told you it's got a lot of solids. You want to be on the medium chain triglyceride side. So this just sort of shows you your PUFAs versus your MUFAs versus your saturated fat. And then you want to stay away from the highly saturated, and you really want a lot of the oleic acid or alpha-linolenic acid versus linoleic acid. Sort of a tongue twister. Alpha-linolenic acid becomes the good part of the inflammatory chain. Linoleic acid becomes the bad part. So if there's one thing you can do to be closer to the Mediterranean diet, start just using extra virgin olive oil and throw all your other oils out, would be my advice. Don't eat processed white food and try to avoid Cheetos.